Okay, we ready? So we all know this man. He's very dynamic, but do we really know Carmen Puliafito? So today, we're doing a one-of-a-kind interview in lieu of a talk. We're going to do Through the Eyes of Carmen Puliafito. So, January 5th, 1951, you were born in Buffalo, New York.
Correct.
And to Dominic and Marie, tell me a little bit about your parents.
My father was a World War II veteran and came to the United States when he was 8 years old from Sicily. And actually, he went from Sicily to New York to Buffalo. And you know what his next stop was when he was 19 years old? Miami Beach, where he came to do his basic training. And after I was talking about the Bascom Palmer job, I remember I said, "Didn't you spend some time in Miami?" And he remember the place. It's called the President Hotel. It's on Collins. You can go and see it, which I did. He worked as a technician at Westinghouse Electric and then became an electrical engineer. And he was one of the guys of that generation that believed in science. I like to say this to people all the time. You know, either you believe in science or you don't. And a lot of the public don't believe in science anymore. And, you know, that's it. My mom was really a homemaker, worked as a dental technician. And after they got married, she really never worked except a couple of times, which is an interesting story about how that happened.
Did you have an affluent childhood? Did you have a lot of stuff or not a lot?
I mean, I think I grew up as a solidly middle-class kid that had just about every resource that you wanted to have. I mean, I look now at what's available to me and my children. It's different, but you know, I've always felt I was on the top of the world, really.
What influences do you think your dad had on you and your mom? What characteristics did you get from each of them?
Well, once again, I think my father was an electrical engineer that believed in science and engineering, wanted his kid to become a doctor because that was the smart thing to do. So I think that in terms of career, that's what it was. He was a straight living individual, which probably means I've probably gone in the wrong direction. Yeah, this was actually graduating from medical school, I think, actually. And yeah, there he is. He's got his three-piece suit on. He was always skeptical about things I did. Skeptical. He was actually skeptical when I moved to Miami, to Bascom Palmer. But he was really skeptical when I became a dean. And about that, he said, you know, it's a lot of politics. And you know, about that, he was really, I think, correct. My mom is still alive. She's 89, and she's a real social animal, knows what's going on, still got all her senses. And so probably that's the relevant thing. I like those. I used to like those glasses, actually.
So it's fair to say that you got your scientific side from your dad and your personality from your mom?
Yeah, yeah. I would say, actually, OCT, these are my two sisters. What are their names again? Kathy and Sally. And this was, I think, about graduating from, I think this is a college, maybe. I don't know. Something like that, yeah.
What influence growing up did your sisters have on you?
They taught me how to deal with Nina Barakal. I think there is a characteristic of a guy that has more sisters than brothers, and I don't know what that characteristic is. They made a lot of fun of me most of the time, and occasionally looked up to me, but, you know, that's it. One of my sisters lives in Irvine, the other one's back in Buffalo.
One's married to an ophthalmologist,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah, yeah,
So here we see a young Carmen.
yeah.
Um,
A lot of pictures with bow ties. I really, actually, apparently that was big back then, yeah.
Were you a studious child?
Yeah. Yeah.
Quiet to yourself?
No. No, never. I mean, I don't know when I figured out that I always wanted to be the smartest kid in the class, but it was pretty early, and it was like 12 years of that, basically. So,
How much of it was hard work, and how much of it is just intelligence?
oh, I don't know. I think I was a good student. I was a hardworking student. I was a gunner. You know, I didn't know what gunning was all about until I ended up at Harvard. And most of the, well, you laugh. They had the same thing at Princeton. Most of the gunners at Harvard were women, actually. And so, you know, being an academic high performer, more difficult in that environment.
You'd mentioned earlier that your dad wanted you to be a doctor. Was that
Yeah.
ingrained in you from a young age?
Yeah. Actually, I think my dad's responsible for OCT because when I used to go home there was really literally nothing to do in my house while I was growing up. That's why I became a stamp collector. But one winter, I was a resident at Mass Eye and Ear and started my laser career after the Academy of 1981. And I was reading one of his old electrical engineering journals, and and talked about this guy at MIT that was doing short pulse generation, Eric Ippen. So I went over as a resident and said, hey, Eric, would you like to, I mean, this guy was in the National Academy of Sciences and Engineering. I didn't know what a big wheel he was. Would you like to work on lasers in the eye with me? He goes, well, not really. He says, but I do have a guy. Hey, Jim. So he called over Jim Fujimoto. So that's the story I told you that. Yeah, hey, Jim.
That's how you met Dr. Fujimoto?
Yeah. Yeah, knocked on his door, which I think is actually a real good way of advancing yourself. Yeah. This was my Harvard yearbook photograph, 1973. We didn't take things too seriously back then. I'm amazed I wore a tie, really.
What growing up in that era, Vietnam,
Yeah.
a lot of things going on. What influenced you?
Honestly, I was a very conservative person when I arrived. In 1969, the world was changing. I actually thought the Vietnam War was a good idea. I was disabused of that notion a few months. And all I can remember is, and I really wasn't a drug user in college, but, I mean, the guy with the mescaline with speakers next to his head blaring music. I mean, most people really spent not a lot of time in the classroom. People were either I knew every demonstrator. I knew Abby Hoffman and Jerry Root, every troublemaker. I met every one of them. They would always be hanging around looking for stuff to do. And so people were really, it was drugs, politics, maybe some sex and rock and roll. I don't know. But that's what it was. But the thing now about universities, actually people study. That's amazing to me. I probably wouldn't have gotten into Harvard Medical School if it wasn't for the Harvard football team because I took like chemistry for idiots. It really worked for me. They would give you the answers. It was great.
Yeah, you weren't a pre-med major though.
Well, I started out as biology, and then I decided that I wanted to be a social scientist. So I became I majored in something called social studies. And I know it's ridiculous, but at Harvard, you actually had to interview to get into this major. They only took 35 people. Everybody in that major, actually, every one of them went on to, Solicitor General of the United States, big wheel law firms. I mean, I was the only doctor. I was the only. In fact, I didn't tell people I was interested in medical school. I did the pre-medical requirements. I didn't tell any of my friends. Only my immediate roommates knew that. I never told anybody what I was doing.
Did you ever waver on that commitment to med school?
No, I once took the law boards, but I still was interested in medical school, yeah.
It's supposed to be graduation.
This is graduation from Harvard, 73. Yep.
Was there ever any question as to where you were going to do your residency?
Well, no, this is, I think this is, yeah, this is college, actually.
Oh, college grad. Okay.
Yeah, this is college, yeah.
No question then where you were going to do your medical school.
I did real well in medical school. I got into Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Penn, and honestly, I had some bad grades actually there, but I still got in. I think back then, you know, now I'm involved with admitting kids to medical school. Back then, people they were more interested in your academic profile. We had I was in Quincy House. Harvard's divided into like, there were 10 houses. This guy, Andy Vernon, he took a liking to me. Here he is. That's the new Quincy House back then. After 40 years, I went to the CDC last year. He spent his whole career at the CDC. I said, Andy, here I am. He goes, where you been? But he took a liking to me, and that year, 10 kids from Quincy House got into Harvard, and Harvard Medical School. And then when he left, I became the pre-medical advisor, so I inherited his job as well.
When did you, I assume you love Boston.
Yeah, I thought, honestly, after I was there for about a year, I defined my entire existence as staying at Boston and Harvard, I would say. That's the way I was defining that's how I viewed myself. Why would you ever leave? This is the top of the world.
And was it the city? Was it the academic
I think
center?
it was all. It was all. All the
Do you
above.
ever think you'll go back to Boston?
Maybe for a Red Sox game, which has really been my pattern. I've been gone for 14 years. Ah, yes, there he is.
So this is your friend Paul.
Yep.
And he is one of the motivations behind you going into ophthalmology.
Yeah.
Tell us about him.
Yeah, so Paul, I met him when I was still going to church, actually, which was about 45 years ago, last time I went to church. No. Yeah, I met him. Yeah, I met him actually going at the Harvard Catholic Center, believe it or not. And we became very friendly. Paul had retinoblastoma with bilateral enucleations when he was 3 years old. And he was a graduate of he was a patient of, not of Reese, but a guy named Ray Pfeiffer. He was treated at Columbia. So through him, I learned a lot about, I remember really 1970 going to Dave Walton, the Children's Hospital, and talking to them about retinoblastoma. So in my own career, the tremendous story of retinoblastoma and the once again, either you believe in science or you're not. So I think that is really one of the sources of my interest in ophthalmology. Yeah.
You lived with him in undergrad and
well, he's been a good friend forever. I mean, we lived together as undergraduates, and then he stayed on in Boston, went to law school. He works at MIT now.
You once gave him a gift.
Yeah.
You want to tell us about that gift?
Well, that gift was, well, you read that they did a profile of me many years ago, and they said that I was maybe not so nice guy because I gave him a kaleidoscope. He was trying to figure out what it was. He went down the hallway and said, hey, my roommate gave me this gift. Could you tell me what it is? Subsequently, he is threatened, and someday he will do this. He said, you know, I'm going to sit in your waiting room and tell every patient, you know, 2 weeks ago, I saw perfectly. I was perfect. I saw Puliafito. Look at me now. And you know, that would work, really. Yeah.
Was in medical school where you met Janet.
Yeah. Yep. Janet Pine, the two P's, P-U and P-I. So we met as freshmen. She was always finished with histology lab before I was. And we started dating in the middle of my third year of medical school.
Was it love at first sight?
You have to ask her about that. I don't know. No, I don't know. Yeah, well, we had a lot in common and a lot of common interests and things, and, you know, been together many years.
39, I think.
39, yeah, at least 39, yeah.
What's the key for staying married happily for 39 years?
Toleration. Yeah. Toleration on her part. I mean, I don't have to have she's super tolerant. I'm not a super tolerant person, but I think in most of these relationships, you say it's toleration of all the not so good things I've done. But in my absence, yes.
Yes, so you did your residency at Mass Ioneer.
Correct.
How was it when you did your residency?
Oh, it was an interesting place. I mean, it's hard to it's difficult to imagine how residencies training has changed since then. And one of my old preceptors, mentors, and bosses is here, Dr. Gregutis. Macula Conference, 1 o'clock every Monday, and tremendous impact. It was a great place. Lots of strange people there. You know, I think you remember. I remember. The older you get, you remember people that you had very peripheral dealings with. But it was a great place.
Who do you think during your residency was the main influence on the path of your career?
I think Evan had a big role, and Klaus Stolman, the chairman, did. When I told him that I was interested in lasers, you know, he said, "Oh, hey, this is a meeting that you need to go to in Munich." And I was I think a resident or a fellow. Maybe I was a fellow. And I think that showed me that if you take an interest in young people and point them in the right direction, even vaguely, you know, good things will happen.
You've always done that with your residents and fellows.
Better at it later on in my career than early, I think. Yeah.
What kind of resident were you?
I don't know. Wise ass. Some people liked me, some people didn't, I think. I was always, I was on an academic track, you know, and so that's both good and bad, the way you look at it. And then I did my fellowship there. I think the key thing is learning the basic principles about learning. It's at Mass Ioneer, knowledge was respected, expertise was respected, I think.
When did you know you wanted to do retina?
Pretty soon, like immediately. And part of this series, the thing that made it weird is that when I was a medical student, I spent almost a year and a half as a fellow with Dan Albert. And Dan had come up from Yale to be a professor. And I mean, they gave him a lousy room. He's a full professor. They gave him a lousy room. He gave me and Delia, they gave him a medical student and Delia Sang, a pre-residency fellow. So I spent a lot of time around Mass Ioneer before I was a resident. So essentially from 76 to 91, I was always there, basically.
This is a book you wrote.
Yeah.
Pioneering work on lasers. As you had mentioned earlier, you can see it's very valuable.
Selling at 1 cent.
Shipping's $3.
1 cent. 1 cent. 1 cent. 1 cent. But see, I don't know. Your research wasn't complete because I did write a book as a medical student.
You did?
I wrote a book as a medical student. It's called Principles of Ophthalmic Pathology. I edited it. So when, you know, sometimes a student comes in and they go, well, like, I'm interested in ophthalmology. What should I do? I said, well, I wrote a book. Here it is. And I'll go to Amazon. And I bought the book. If you buy the book, the price of the next book goes up. You know, if you buy it for 11 cents, the next one's more. Yeah.
One of your co-authors on the book is this man, Roger Steiner.
Yeah, Roger Steiner. Yep. I met Roger first week at Harvard. He'll tell you that I came to borrow some homework from his roommate, Eric Louie. But Roger and I became very good friends. We actually ended up in the same house, and we were in the same medical school class, and he was going to be an orthopedic surgeon. I explained to him to be in ophthalmology. So we worked together on lasers right from the very. I think partnership is an important thing. You know, when I came back from the academy in '81, and I said, you know, I want to be the world's greatest laser expert. I said, can you want to help me? He goes, okay. He goes, you might actually be able to do that. You know that? I bet you might actually be able to do that. So we worked together very, very closely.
Authored almost 200 papers.
Yeah.
Which one's your favorite?
I think that's an interesting one. I think the OCT of macular disease paper. You know. I mean, the first time I talked about OCT, I mean, I really wish that I'd taken better notes while we were working on OCT, of what people's reaction to it were, because the reaction wasn't necessarily so good. I talked about it for the first time. I looked at the Macula Society in 1994, 21 years ago. So I'd say the stuff around OCT.
Speaking of lasers.
And the one case report on Avastin.
Adam, can we roll the first video?
Oh, God.
This is back to your laser work here briefly.
All right, let's see what this, I don't.
See at the beginning of this is Roger.
He looks like a...
Photo disruption can be defined as the use of high peak power ionizing laser pulses to disrupt tissue.
You were a dynamic speaker back then,
the Q-switched
just
and
like you are
mode-locked
today.
neodymium YAG lasers are clinical photo disruptors. By emitting light pulses lasting billionths or trillionths of a second, focused to a spot 10 to 50 microns in size, these lasers create such a strong
It doesn't get any better.
electromagnetic
Okay, we can
field
stop it.
that electrons are accelerated free from their atoms.
So that
This process is known as optical breakdown.
video is 45 minutes long.
I've never watched it, actually. I didn't realize it existed, actually. I forgot. I've never really seen it.
Well, you're not alone.
Where did you
no
find
one's
that
watched that full
thing?
video.
Yeah, no one watched it. Oh, yeah.
So you talked a little bit about
Yeah,
Jim Fujimoto.
Yeah, Jim's a special guy. We worked together. We worked together from 1982 till 1991 before we came up with the OCT paper. And what the story was, we were generating real short pulses, and there was really nothing to do with them except to do optical ranging. So we measured things like optical ranging, the shorter the pulse width, the shorter the distance that you could measure. And then he said, no, I think we should do this the interferometry approach. So he really cooked that up. And then, the rest is history. And we still work together. Here it is. Here they are. Yeah. Paper been cited. Actually, if you look at my, G or H ranking in ophthalmology, like I was #1 like a year ago. It's really because of this paper. This paper was cited 7,000 times or something. Some unbelievable number of times. Yeah.
We've got your work with YAG laser. We have your work with OCT, Avastin. What are you most proud of?
I think OCT and OCT basically, and the fact that OCT has driven really a fundamental therapeutic revolution in ophthalmology. I mean, it's the linkage between the diagnostic and the therapeutic that really makes big deal. Oh yeah.
Tell us about this patient.
Well, I've always enjoyed doing strange stuff. This patient was a hawk, Nikina, the red-tailed hawk, and here we are. We're doing this hawk had hit a power line, and had trauma, and had a secluded pupil. So we did a pupilloplasty, and we issued all these press releases and stuff. It was international news, actually. I don't know if you have the headline. Hub Hospital flies to Hawk's rescue. Eagle-eyed doc save Hawk site. I mean, in the Boston Herald, okay, which is the tabloid, it was the inside. It was the day. It was in 1988. It was the day that Dukakis declared his candidacy for the presidency. So Dukakis was on the front cover. And you turn it up, and I was in the whole inside third page, the second front cover. Dukakis spends the winter in Los Angeles, so he's been at my house about 3 or 4 times. I showed him this thing. I said, you kept me off the front page of the Boston Herald. He goes, yeah, I did, didn't I? He goes, maybe it worked out better for you in the end.
I think the Hawk probably did better than he did.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
Took over at Tufts in 1991.
Correct.
We're there through 2001. What was that like?
Best job of my life. Because Tufts was a mess. It was a joke, actually. I mean, I shouldn't say that to people there before. I mean, and I was annoyed with Fred Jacobiak, who was the chairman at Mass Eye and Ear. I don't know. I was just annoyed. was a funny time politically at the organization. And a whole bunch of people had interviewed for this job. And I remember Tom Freiberg, he said, you know, that is the Biafra of eye clinics over there. And people don't even know what Biafra is. You know, it's just like this totally impoverished part of Nigeria. There was nothing there. And, but it was actually, it showed you, that demonstrated that I had one talent. I was a great builder. I could build something from really nothing. And Tufts today, the New England Eye Center is still doing wonderfully. A bunch of you train there. It's a great retina program. Clinically, it's doing very well. But, you know, I think that's the best job I've had, actually.
One of the guys you recruited
Yeah,
there.
Jay. Jay's the smartest man in ophthalmology. I used to give that title to Mort Goldberg, but he's a super smart guy, great surgeon, great consultant. And he was there from 92 on. He's still there now. So, and the thing that's great is I've been able to keep connected with all these guys. And then, of course, Bascom Palmer Eye Institute.
Went to Bascom Palmer in
Right.
2001.
Right.
Why'd you take that job?
Because Don D'Amico here, I don't know, yeah, so remember that? He said to me, I was at a NEOS meeting, and I'd been at Tufts for 10 years. I really wasn't looking for a job. And, you know, Don, you told me that Tufts was not going to work either, right? You told me it wasn't going to work. So then I got him the job at Cornell, and he turned that around, too. Isn't that the best job you've had, building? Building is always fun. So anyways, he comes to me, he says, hey, you know, there's some issues down there at Bascom Palmer. Really? He said, maybe that'd be a good job for you. Literally, that's how that happened. And so I knew John Clarkson because we'd done on some academy program once in Palm Springs. Oh man, that was crazy too. I went to like the golf tournament and did other things. And so I wrote him a letter in May of that year, May of '91. I wrote John Clarkson a letter, said, hey, dear John, hope everything's great. I hear you're doing a search down there at Bascom Palmer. Things are good for me in Boston, but, you know, I might be interested in looking for a new challenge. Put it in the mail. Just mail them a letter. Didn't know, I don't know. Do we have email in '91? Maybe not. In September, I was in my office and I call from Lanny Gardner, chair of medicine down here. He says, hey, you interested in that job? So I came down here for the interview. And we went to, this is actually another tradition. For every job interview, I always go to a sporting event. For USC, I went to the Dodger game the night before. For this one, I met with the guys on Sunday. I went to Dolphins, I think it was still Pro Player at the time. And I remember thinking, 1-800-CRIMINAL, you know? And I knew I wanted to come here. 1-800-CRIMINAL, yeah.
One of the biggest things that you did while at Bascom was utilize Avastin in the eye. Tell us that story.
Yeah, I would say, what I would say about Bascom Palmer is, if you look at why Bascom Palmer, when they did that first survey in 1985 with U.S. News and World Report, and Wilmer was 1 and Bascom Palmer was 2, I think the people in Miami were actually surprised. I'm told that they were surprised. But the reality is that Bascom Palmer illustrates the power of innovation because they had Dr. Gass and fluorescein angiography, 1964. Look at the data. It's unbelievable. And they had vitrectomy with Dr. Mockemer. And somehow Mockemer has not gotten all the credit that he needs to get about that. And I would say what I did at Bascom Palmer, my own self-assessment is I restored the spirit of innovation at Bascom Palmer, number 1. And I brought Bascom Palmer into the 20th century by basically radically improving it was a very insular Catholic institution in the sense that, you know, the concept of outside the church there is no salvation. Really. But they give you a what? A Bible. Yeah, no, I went along with the Bible thing too, actually, which is an interesting. Lawton Smith became a friend of mine, but we increased the size of the faculty, more women, younger people, more diverse, and the results speak for themselves. I mean, Bascom Palmer is still doing really good. So one of the things I did was good old Phil Rosenfeld, who Phil was just super smart dude. I mean, and he was struggling there, I would say. I mean, I don't know if he's here. He probably would disagree with that. You're here? I'm here. Yeah. So I remember I would always tell when I got down there, there was no OCT. I brought my OCT, and just I was leaving Tufts, a guy named Bill Green. And see, this is the thing. It's all anecdotes, but all true. Bill Green, who was a guy at Genentech, goes, "Hey, Carmen, I'm Bill Green. You know, we got this thing. It's called this drug. It's Rufab V2." Really? He says, "You know, I think that machine you've got, that is the ultimate way of evaluating the treatment effect." And Phil was already working on this, but it's really unleashing the creative potential of a guy like Phil Rosenfeld, who's had a phenomenal impact on our profession. So, and I always said, you're going to be the king of macular degeneration. See, it worked. Yeah, what did I say? Oh yeah, well that's right. No, no. Well, it was May. That's right. It was the week after ARVO. It was May 10th. We're having the 10th year anniversary of Avast, and everybody from Genentech is welcome to that party. And he said it was May 10th. We sat around the table. Corey was in the room. He goes, it's about that time of the year, May 10th, because the fiscal year starts in July. He says, I figured this out. I talked to the guys, the VEGF trap guys. They're injecting this stuff into monkey eyes. And I looked at this. I looked at the molarity of the pH of Avastin. It's even better than Lucentis. And we had a Lucentis desert. The phase 3 were over. He goes, and I've already talked to the pharmacist, and he's aliquoted into the syringes. And the next day, I injected the first patient. But I never took credit for it because it was Phil's idea, and I wanted Genentech to be mad at him and not me. It didn't work.
So in 2007, you took over as dean at Keck School of Medicine.
Yeah, it sounded a good idea at the time. Yeah.
Was it a hard decision?
I don't know. I'm kind of an impulse player, I mean, it's like, honestly, I mean, people out there, I met a lot of people, and one guy named Alan Norton. He's a guy I tried to get $20 million from. I'll still get the money from him. I will. And he goes to me, he did his residency at Wilmer, and he did a fellowship with Taylor Smith. And he looked at me and goes, you had the best job in the world. What the hell did you become dean for? And that's a real good question. I think somebody, I wasn't looking for the job. Somebody called me up. It was a guy that had been our previous practice management here. He goes, "Hey, I got a job over there." And the place was a mess. They had this. We were suing Tenet and this. But it was in California, and the guy that recruited me, Max Nikias, who's now the president of USC, he was just he was like the world's best sales guy. And that's it. So I've had a good time there. Unforgettable experience, really. But I've stayed connected with ophthalmology, as you know, since that's what I like doing. I think that's the other thing about my life, I would say. Do what you like doing, even if it doesn't fit exactly what somebody thinks you should be doing.
What's your leadership style? How would you describe yourself?
Leadership style? I don't know. I'm driven. I'm results-oriented. I lead from the front. I'm never going to ask people to do something that I'm not going to do, okay? So if I ask somebody, you got to go out and see some patients. I want you to see Naples. So I think that's part of it. And I think the other thing, I would say I'm effective. Now, effectiveness is, there are lots of people that can say good things, but effectiveness, stuff happens, okay? Stuff happens. And that is, it's combined with having an idea of where to go with that. Okay. So,
what do you look for when you hire somebody?
Well, right now I'm recruiting leader. I mean, at the highest level, we're looking for people that can lead, and have a track record of leading, and are smart, really, and have some sense of their own personal limitations and skills. Yeah.
How do you see OCT angiography fitting in with what we do?
Well, I think, I've been involved with OCT for a long time, and when I when I moved from Boston to Miami, we worked on the Stratus thing, and then I thought spectral domain was very important. We hired Dr. Zhao, built a whole laboratory, and we got back into this OCT. I got back into it about a year and a half ago because I think this is important. I think what's going to happen, it's going to be multimodal imaging. You're going to get that cross-sectional OCT is still your number one decision-making tool. This stuff is interesting, but it will be a complement to what's going on. I think it's going to be very, very important.
5 years from now, are we still going to be injecting people the way
It's
we
going to
do?
be way down. I mean, I think the thing that's amazed me is that how much people have gone away from macular fluorescein angiography. It's gone to like nothing. And no one's keeping real good track about that. But when I see a faculty member at USC say, well, here, I did a OCT, I did a fluorescein of the patient's macula using the Optos, I go like, what planet are we on? And the reality is that people will use the wide field system because it's easier to use, and really what they're caring about is capillary non-perfusion and diabetes, and macular thickness is all that counts because the network also killed it because really just look at the OCT. That's it.
So family,
Yep.
3 children.
3 kids, great kids, yep.
Tell me a bit about them.
That's my daughter. She's 30 now. She works in San Francisco, went to Northwestern. She works for a company that does Misfit wearables. The baby, middle guy, Sam, he's 21 now. He's at the University of Chicago. And he's an interesting guy. He takes a lot. I think he wants to be a lawyer, but he's doing religious studies. And then that's good old Ben. Ben, we never could quite figure out Ben. Never could figure him out. He had trouble like reading the first couple of years, and he's in medical school now, actually, doing very well. And he's at Einstein doing medical school. So, yeah, this is this year's Christmas photo. Yep.
What kind of father are you?
Well, I think you have to ask them. I mean, I think I was an absent dad. I think I was always traveling and work. So travel and work, 2 priorities. So I've done a lot of that. So.
Would you do anything different if you could do it over?
Probably not. I don't know. I think it's hard to say. I mean, my wife. I have regrets about everything, but most of the decisions I probably wouldn't change.
A few more questions, then we'll take just a few questions from the audience as far as that goes. When you're gone, how do you want people to remember you?
Well, yeah, I do actually read obituaries. I'm somebody who reads obituaries in the New York Times every day. I think scholar, inventor, and dean, probably those are the things. I mean, I think I'm mainly proud of what I did in ophthalmology. So.
All right, do we have some circulating mics for questions out of the audience? We've got about 5 minutes for some questions.
Inflammatory questions are good
Dr.
too.
Polifito, Dr. Polifito, so over
There's
here.
Fortune, yeah, Fortune. Oh God.
Dr. Polifito, tell us about your stamp collection.
Oh yeah.
That toured the United States and your favorite stamp.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Well, growing up in Buffalo, nothing to do, really, literally nothing. 3 TV stations. I had lunch with the CEO of DreamWorks on the CEO of Jeff Small on Tuesday, St. Patrick's Day, and I was telling him like, hey, there was really nothing. I mean, now was 400 channels and streaming on everything. There were 3 channels, 1 evening newspaper, and nothing to do. So I started to mail away for stamps. And so I had stamps. My first article that I wrote for a stamp journal when I was like when I was 13 years old. I mean, that's a loser thing, isn't it, though? Wow.
If you hadn't been an ophthalmologist or you hadn't been in science, what would you have done? What do you think?
Criminal defense attorney. Do you think I'd be good at that?
Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah. Those are my kind of people, I think.
Carmen. Hey,
Yeah.
Carmen, over here. Way before it was a trend, you got an MBA from Wharton.
Right.
What advantage was that? Would you do it
Oh,
again?
man, I think I know Linda Lamb is getting her MBA at my urging. I think if you're interested in doing any kind of management or have any kind of leadership position, having the basic business skills is great. And business, financial analysis, it's a different way of looking at problems. And I think it's tremendously helpful. Most of the people that get into trouble that in my own organization are people that don't really have really just super basic financial skills. So I think it's useful. And back when I did that in 95, I did it 95 to 97. That was a really good thing to do, but people were doing it. There was a couple of guys, some big Will at Hopkins had done it, and now it's sort of coming back. I think it's useful.
Dr. Flynn.
Carmen, we really enjoyed you as chair, and one of the things that I liked about Carmen was he was willing to lay down in front of the tanks. And so, that you're important about your point about being out front in front of your faculty, but that was really appreciated.
Well, it's nice of you to say that, Harry.
But, because we had these bureaucratic decisions, it was always something coming down the pike. But one of the things I also liked about Carmen was that he knew how to talk like Tony Soprano.
Yeah.
He could use four-letter words as nouns, adjectives, adverbs. And I saw it happen on more than one occasion. And I was about to die laughing. I was rolling on the floor. Go, Carmen, go.
Yeah. Now, sometimes that's embarrassing. I try to hold that in check. But the reality, here's the reality, though. The reality is, if there are important things, you have to be willing to stand up for them and make people know that it is important to do that. And I go back to this thing about effectiveness, And Harry's a guy, look at Harry was a Bascom Palmer true believer from way back when. And finally, Harry and I became really very good friends. I mean, it was my privilege of making him the Donald M. Gass Distinguished Professor of Ophthalmology. I know, yeah, let's give him a round of applause for that, yeah. When I did that, I sent out a letter announcing this to everybody and his brother, and I got literally hundreds of responses back. So I think the thing that's great about ophthalmology is we still have some level of collegiality, which you see here. In a way, really honestly, that other medical specialties really don't have. It's weird. I mean, I talked to the division chiefs of cardiology in the United States on Sunday in San Diego at the American College of Cardiology meeting. Man, what a group, how the mighty have fallen. Really, defeated.
So Carmen,
Yeah.
you're a passionate collector. I mean, you have probably one of the world's largest collection of baseball cards. You have an incredible stamp collection. You got into wine. You seem to really go in and zoom to the top in your collection. So what are you thinking about collecting next?
Well, the last thing I collected, and I told this to one of my colleagues, was started collecting rare bourbons. That's crazy. You could finish that project in a couple of weeks. It costs you a lot of money.
It's cooler than
It's
stamp
that
collecting.
it's that 23-year-old Pappy Van Winkle. But the most amazing thing about that is going once again. It's the unexpected places. So I was looking for the local liquor store, the most shabby place in the world, and I was saying something about Pappy. You mean this? This? You mean this? We'll give you a discount on it. What's that? No, I didn't steal a grade.
We got Dr. Sisk.
Hey, over on your left. I just wanted to ask you what your most memorable or funny encounter with a patient was.
Oh God. Patient. Huh? That's a hard one. They're all great. Oh, this is a good one. This is a Mass Eye and Ear story. Evan will like this one. I think he probably remembers it. So we did a retinal detachment repair on a patient. Remember this thing? Remember this patient? This is totally freaking crazy. So the patient comes in, and this was buckle only back there. And we used to examine the patients on their back in a dark room. So I come in, and let's say the patient's real name was John Romero, okay? So I go in, look, and what then? The fellows would draw the patient. You go and look at the patient. Oh, great. I said, what's this patient's name? Charlie Sheen, or something like that. I go like, wait a second. I know, I've got a very good memory, those of you who've dealt with me. I said, that's my buckle. I did that. The guy, so he could get Medicaid or something, had changed his identity. And I got that. I said, you really didn't need to change your identity to get your post-op care. Remember that? It was the most incredible thing. It hasn't happened. What's that? Among others, yeah. No, I like crazy patients. I really do. I like nuts. I mean, I kind of actually more. I had one patient. This is a patient that's coming up on Monday. So, and I like to I was torturing this lady, and this will be my last comment. So, she came in. She was a lawyer, referred to me by the head of pediatrics. Had a macular hole. Needed a macular hole repair. Oh my God! She asked me so many this question, that question. Oh yeah. So she had the macular hole repair. 20/20 result. Had her cataract done fine. Calls me up like last week, a week and a half ago, and said, I got a little something in my other eye. So she comes in, you'll like this, and she's got a very small macular hole with VMT. So guess what I did? I said, we gave her the whole briefing on Jetria, and then I said, why don't you go and see what Dr. Google has to say about this? So I'm going to do a Jetria injection on her on Monday. She signed up for it. So this is my way of getting even with the patient. Give them Jetria. No. It's even better. I had her request Jetria. It's even better. Yeah.
Carmen, one more question. Hey, what's your very best interview question? How do you weed out the crazies?
What's that?
How do you weed out the crazies? What's your best interview question?
Oh, interview question? Oh, I don't know. I don't think there's one. I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer to that one, I don't think. Crazy weeding out. They're usually pretty easy to find. Well, they start talking is usually what happens.
Well, Dr. Pulifido, we have one more question.
Carmen, you're deservedly on the list of great people that have given us monumental inventions, like Helmholtz and Gullstrand, and then Novotny and Elvis, too. And again, some of the people in the audience may not have known exactly all the names I've mentioned, which is pointed to one of my questions. How important is it that young people know who invented what?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think you're in it's the great chain of being and the great chain of science. I think so, absolutely. Absolutely.
And a lot of the young people in the audience, too, are budding inventors. Most retina people think, I got a great idea for something. What advice do you have as a mentor to someone who wants to be an inventor, how to get their ideas across?
Well, Derek, we're going to talk about this in the panel discussion. I think basically try to reduce it to practice. Don't be extravagant don't think it's going to make you a lot of money. Because actually, with OCT, the goal from OCT, because we did a startup, the goal was really to get it out there and become famous. I made a bunch of money, but I could have made a lot more, really, in the end, if I started my own company and done everything. And MIT had such a hard time licensing that technology that they let us start the company. And then we gave it back. We basically, the royalty stream, we gave it back to Mass Eye and Ear and MIT. So.
Well, I've got to say, Dr. Pulifido, from the Vit Buckle Society, thank you for joining us, and thanks for all that you've done for us.
Thank you.